Um, just a short story, which is mostly based on a true story. Nazi Germany, 1939, you're put into a battalion of about 200 men, and you're told that the German army needs help. You're also given a rifle and given a command. So you're a man of about 40 years old. You have worked a relatively mundane job your whole life. You have a family and children. But in just a matter of minutes, you are turned into a killer. Now weeks pass, and you actually start enjoying the process of killing people. You start to compare how many people you killed with your squad members, and you try to outdo each other in this. And this is a relatively common phenomenon, I guess, in war-torn countries. And I say this to make everyone in the room realize that we are not very far from people like this. We're all capable of acting in the manner that they acted. Given the right circumstances, given a rifle and enough social conformity, any of us would have pulled the trigger, even on a child, which was the majority of cases in Germany back then. Now, I've been interested in the topic of evil for a couple of years now. I study it from, I would say, from a moral and a psychological perspective. I've read a couple of books on it. And the 3 minute points for my speech are going to be the TED Talk by Philip Zimbardo, The Line Between Good and Evil, and where we go from here after getting to know the topic more. So my main point number 1 is about the talk, and so Philip Zimbardo is a famous social psychologist who talked about the Abu Ghraib prison, which was a prison in Iraq where inhumane tortures were taking place. The place was shut down in 2004, I believe, after it was discovered, and there were US soldiers in a maximum security prison torturing Iraqis. And the pictures, I mean, I saw some of the pictures online, and it's stuff that you would never realize a human would do to another human being. And these soldiers were not necessarily evil people. They were there with good intentions to serve their country. And so, Philip Zimbardo also talks about his experiment. He did an experiment in Stanford. It was called the Stanford Prison Experiment, where he took participants and he placed them in a prison setting. So he divided them into prisoners and guards, gave the guards glasses to symbolize anonymity. He gave them clothes, like uniforms, and he also gave them like batons and stuff. And he put the prisoners in jumpsuits and into jail cells. And he had to shut down the experiment, and he wanted to see what people would do in such circumstances. He wanted to see how the system would turn these men into evil people. And he had to shut down the experiment after six days because 5 of the participants had mental and emotional breakdowns. And the guards, which were participants, started to beat them, started to sexually mock them. And so, yeah, there's some pictures of that also. And he also talks about an experiment that was done in the 1950s, the Milgram experiment, where people were told every time the participant answers a wrong question, you shock them. And the shock would go from 0 to 450 volts. And what they said, what the Psychiatric Association said was only 1% of the participants will go all the way to 450, because 450 is where you can actually kill a person. And they were wrong. 65% of the people went all the way. And during the experiment, people would be like, they would turn to the scientists and they would say, you know, I don't feel comfortable giving the shock to a person, because they would hear from the next room screams that they can't breathe, they're gonna have a heart attack. And the person would just tell them, it's okay, I'm responsible for it, just give them the 450 volt shock. And so this is where obeying the authority comes into play. So the glasses was with anonymity, and you're given the power, and in this situation it was the responsibility is completely taken off of you, so you're willing to go to 450 volts. Now many of you might be thinking that you're good people, and I'm sure many of you are, but we never look at the other side, is how many of us think that we're actually bad people. And so this gets me to my next point. which I'm going to read a quote by a Russian author by the name of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who survived the concentration camps in Russia, and he saw the worst types of human behavior, even amongst the people who were in the concentration camp. And he said, if only it were all so simple, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and they were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? So, a lot of the time, we're willing to draw the line of good before our feet and the evil on the others, but it's actually a line that cuts across your heart, which you're able to cross that line to the evil or the good. And I think we have this mindset because we're being raised in a relatively safe society, and we're never forced to commit evil deeds, even if it's just for self-preservation and self-defense. And so we have drawn the line between us and others, so like good and evil. And I would say my third point is, where do we go from here after taking that responsibility onto us? And I would say that it's the key to understanding ourselves and the limitations and strengths that we have. I think if we understand that if we were in Nazi Germany in 1939, we would be Nazis. We would not claim to be morally superior and stuff, because during the culture, conformity, and everything else I discussed, it would be very hard to stand out and say that what they were doing was wrong. And so, yeah, and so I talked about three things: the line between good and evil, the Zimbardo's TED Talk, and what we can do about it. And I completely understand that this is a topic not many of us think about, and I already said why. But I urge people to reconsider where they draw that line between good and evil people, and when we draw it onto us, and I think we take the responsibility onto us, and that's a first step towards, I guess, maturing. So, thank you.